A developing story that we have been covering here over the last 30 minutes to an hour, the International Criminal Court issuing arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, his former defense minister, and Hamas officials, accusing them of war crimes and crimes against humanity over their 13-month war in Gaza and the October 2023 attack on Israel. Netanyahu condemned the arrest warrant against him, saying Israel, quote, rejects with disgust the absurd and false actions in a statement that was released by his office. He said, quote, there is nothing more to this than just the war that Israel has been waging in Gaza. The decision turns Netanyahu and the others into internationally wanted suspects and is likely to further isolate them and complicate efforts to negotiate a ceasefire to end the fighting. But its practical implications could be limited since Israel and its major ally, the U.S., are not members of the court, and two of the Hamas officials have been killed in the conflict. So much to discuss, as well as the latest between Israel and Hezbollah. So I do want to bring in Hussain Abul-Hussain, a research fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, to discuss all of it. Thank you so much, as always, for taking the time to be here with us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Good morning. Well, first off, want to talk about this ICC arrest warrant, because it's important to note that we knew this was coming. We heard from the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court that he was requesting these warrants. What are the thoughts overall about this? As we knew, this was going to happen, but it sounds as though Netanyahu, the U.S., have said none of this really matters overall.
Well, it's the warrant is certainly absurd. It doesn't make sense. These wars are not fought by persons, even if Bibi Netanyahu is the prime minister, but he represents the state of Israel, the people of Israel, the security establishment, the military, you name it. So it's not like he's going after Palestinians himself or for his own sake. There's the whole nation of Israel is involved in this. And to my mind, this sets a dangerous precedent. What happens if the ICC comes after any one of our presidents? For example, President Trump for taking out Qasem Soleimani, or President Biden for taking out a few Iraqi pro-Iran militias in Iraq, or President Bush, or any one of our President Obama. So it looks very absurd to me. It doesn't make sense, and frankly, it looks like a political hit job on Israel, all of it, not only on Bibi Netanyahu.
And of course, we're going to see more of that develop here in the coming hours as we get a little bit more information. But I definitely wanted to ask you about that first. Now, I do want to take you out to this live image of Beirut, Lebanon right now, as the smoke is still kind of rising here. There's been a lot of discussion about a potential ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. But does it appear that, in your opinion, Israel has achieved all of its goals in Lebanon, or is there more still left to accomplish?
Israel has achieved all its military goals. What remains is that Israel wants to make sure that once it takes its foot off the gas, that Hezbollah does not reconstitute and resupply. This is the sticking issue that we see between the two sides, and this is what U.S. diplomacy has been trying to resolve. So far, it doesn't seem that the state of Lebanon is willing to step up and take responsibility for its own state and for its own sovereignty. And as long as this is the case, I see the Israelis will continue to put pressure on Lebanon for the Lebanese to just step up and say, okay, if the war stops, Israel can rest assured that Hezbollah cannot come back anytime in the future.
I've asked a lot of different experts about this, but I want to get your take here as we talk about those near daily barrages of rockets and missiles that have been fired from Lebanon by Hezbollah over at Israel. We know that Israel has been striking those strongholds that are held by Hezbollah in Lebanon. So where is this weaponry coming from? Because it seems as though they almost have an endless supply of these weapons that they're firing over at Israel.
Well, before the war broke out, estimates had it that Hezbollah had anywhere between 120,000 and 150,000 rockets. And I think since then, Israel has taken out a lot of those, both the rockets that were hidden in depots, and rocket launchers. So what we see now are the smaller rockets. The war did not get anywhere to the predictions of pre-war predictions, when everyone expected Hezbollah to launch thousands of missiles and rockets at Israel on any given day. Everyone expected Hezbollah to jam Israeli air defenses. This has not happened. What you see now are the smaller rockets that Hezbollah is using. Now, I've also seen reports that at this rate, if Hezbollah keeps on launching up to 100 projectiles, both rockets and explosive drones, against Israel, they will run out of rockets by July max. So I don't think they're resupplying at this point, but I think it'll take some time to see the whole stock, to see Hezbollah run out of its stock, just like what happened in Gaza. In Gaza, there are no more rockets. We only get occasionally, from time to time, 1 or 2 rockets that Hamas still has and that it fires on Israel.
Heading back to the U.S., talking more about the situation in the United Nations, we know the U.S. actually vetoed that United Nations resolution yesterday that would have called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Essentially, they said that it did not provide any sort of text that included the fact that the hostages need to be released as well. So my question for you, what does that say overall about the relationship and where it stands between the U.S. and Israel? Because we know there's been a lot of disagreement, so to speak, between President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu. But where does that relationship stand overall between the two countries?
Well, this deserves a shout out for this administration for standing its ground and being the lone voice in support of Israel. And I think this was a principled stance. It's not something new. The Biden administration did not change its position. This has been its position all along, that any ceasefire in Gaza should be also connected to the release of hostages. Washington did this a few months back, time and again, and I think they did it one more time yesterday, and I think they'll still do it if this vote comes up again at the Security Council.
Senator Bernie Sanders and some of the Democratic lawmakers tried yesterday to pass legislation that would halt the sale of arms to Israel. The measure, of course, failed as it was expected to. Is there any world where the U.S. would, let's say, abruptly stop supplying Israel with weapons?
Well, number one, this reasserts that going against Israel is not really popular in the United States, whether at the popular level, election level, or inside the Senate or the House. And I have no idea why someone like Senator Sanders would insist on losing vote after another. Now, on the other hand, I think this is extremely dangerous for the United States to withhold arming or selling arms to allies, not only Israel, every other ally. Allies expect us to be reliable, especially during the time of war. And if we have some takes against whatever course of war or the way our allies are handling their war, we take them behind closed doors. But we don't do this political theater and threaten allies in the middle of war that, look, we might stop shipping arms to you. I think this is very dangerous, not only for Israel, this is very dangerous for the image and the credibility of the United States government. I think this was a very miscalculated or bad step on the part of Senator Sanders. I think it was the wrong choice, and I'm happy that it got soundly defeated.
I want to pop up these images that we showed a bit earlier here as Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu made a fairly rare visit over to Gaza. Does that say anything about the status of the war with the Hamas terror group and whether the situation there in any way has become less dangerous?
Well, it has absolutely become less dangerous. I think what we see, what has remained from Hamas in the Gaza Strip are small groups that we call hit and run groups. They try to ambush Israeli soldiers or to try to kill one or two or more of them. But beyond that, I don't think Hamas is really in charge of the Strip anymore. And of course, these images support the argument that Israel is has the upper hand now in the Strip. Now, unfortunately, Israel cannot really police the dense civilian areas of Gazans, but in terms of military, I think Israel certainly controls the Strip now.
One thing that was interesting is Netanyahu actually announced that he is going to offer $5 million for each of the hostages for people who do return them. They would get $5 million for each hostage that they returned. Is that a real offer? And is it likely that we see anyone actually take him up on that?
Well, I think it's absolutely real. I think Israel would pay even more if it can get out any or all of its hostages that are still with Hamas. And I don't think the issue is related to information. I think even if the Israeli intelligence, which has shown real prowess in this war, whether against Hamas or Hezbollah, I think even if they know where the hostages are, they fear that any rescue operation might be too complicated and might lead to the death of these hostages. Now, we've seen in the past that when Israel tried to extract 5 or 6 hostages, what Hamas captors did is that they killed them just a short while before the Israeli force got to them. So I think, of course, Israel would pay anyone who can get these hostages out or who can give information. But the challenge here is that even if you have the information, how can you extract them out of the hand of Hamas terrorists?
All right. Hussain Abul-Hussain with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thank you so much, as always, for taking the time to join us and help break down all the latest developments here. Anything else that you want to add before I let you go?
Well, I think what we see is that war on both fronts is being phased out. I think we should have some more faith in what Israel is doing. I think they're on the right path. They just need our support, like we've been supporting them. And I think I'm optimistic moving forward.
All right. Thank you again for taking the time to join us this morning. As always, we appreciate it.
Thank you.